Tom was homeless. He had been living on the streets for years, ever since he lost his job and couldn't pay his rent. The city had become his home, but it was a harsh and unforgiving place. He lived on the streets, moving from one corner to another, trying to find a safe spot to rest. The nights were the hardest, with the cold seeping into his bones and the noise of the city never letting him sleep peacefully. Every day was a struggle. He had to fight for survival, facing hunger, exhaustion, and the constant threat of danger. The streets were not kind to those who had nowhere else to go. He slept on a park bench, his only refuge from the chaos around him. The bench was hard and uncomfortable, but it was better than the cold, hard ground. Finding food was a constant worry. He often felt invisible as people walked by without a second glance. He rummaged through trash cans, hoping to find something edible, but it was never enough. People walked by, not even noticing him. To them, he was just another face in the crowd, another problem they didn't want to deal with. The loneliness was overwhelming. One day, Tom felt especially low. The weight of his situation was crushing him, and he didn't know how much longer he could go on. He had not eaten in a day, and his stomach growled in protest. He had not eaten in a day. His body was weak, and he felt like he could collapse at any moment. The hunger was a constant, gnawing pain that never went away. His clothes were old and torn, barely providing any protection from the elements. He looked down at his tattered shoes, wondering how much longer they would hold together. He sat on his bench, lost in thought. Memories of better days flooded his mind, but they felt like a distant dream. He wondered if he would ever find a way out of this nightmare. His hand went to his pocket, feeling for anything that might help him. All he had left was $1. It wasn't much, but it was all he had. All he had left was $1. He stared at it, wondering how far it could take him. It might buy him a small meal, but it wouldn't last long. Tom knew this dollar could buy him a small meal. It might be the only meal he'd have for a while. He had to make a decision. It might be the only meal he'd have for a while, but as he looked around, he saw someone who seemed worse off than him. Another homeless person shivering in the cold, but as he looked around, he saw someone who seemed worse off than him. Compassion stirred in his heart. He knew what he had to do. A young woman was digging through a trash can, her hands trembling as she searched for anything that could ease her hunger. The streets were cold and unforgiving, and she had been out here for days, scavenging for scraps. Her clothes were just as ragged as his. She looked desperate, her eyes darting around as if searching for a miracle. The weight of her struggles was evident in every movement she made. Tom's heart ached for her. He had been in her shoes not too long ago, feeling the same despair and hopelessness. The memory of those dark days was still fresh in his mind. He knew what it felt like to be that hungry, to feel the gnawing pain in his stomach and the emptiness in his soul. It was a feeling that never truly left you, no matter how much time passed. Tom walked over to the woman, his footsteps slow and deliberate. He could feel the weight of the dollar bill in his pocket, the last remnant of his own struggle for survival. He hesitated for a moment, his mind racing with thoughts of what that dollar could buy him. A meal, a bit of warmth, a brief respite from the harsh reality of his life. This dollar was his lifeline, a fragile thread that kept him connected to hope. But as he looked at the woman, he knew that she needed it more than he did. But something inside him told him to help. It was a voice he couldn't ignore, a call to show kindness in a world that had shown him so little. He held out the dollar to the woman. "Here," Tom said softly, his voice filled with compassion. "Get yourself something to eat. Get yourself something to eat." It was a simple gesture, but it carried the weight of his own experiences and the hope that it could make a difference. The woman looked up in surprise, her eyes wide with disbelief. She had not expected kindness from a stranger, especially one who seemed to be struggling just as much as she was. She couldn't believe someone as poor as Tom would be so generous. It was a rare moment of humanity in a world that often felt devoid of it. Her eyes welled up with tears, a mixture of gratitude and relief. In that moment she felt seen, understood, and cared for. It was a feeling she had almost forgotten. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "This means more than you know." She took the dollar with trembling hands. She promised to never forget his kindness. Tom felt a warmth spread through him. It was a feeling he hadn't felt in a long time, the feeling of helping someone in need. He knew he had done the right thing. He walked away, feeling lighter than he had in days. Even though he was still homeless and hungry, he felt a flicker of hope. What Tom didn't know was that someone had seen his act of kindness. A man across the street had witnessed the entire exchange. He was touched by Tom's generosity. He approached Tom. "Excuse me," the man said. "I saw what you did. That was an incredibly kind thing you did for that woman." Tom shrugged, embarrassed. He didn't expect any recognition. The man continued, "I'd like to help you get back on your feet. I have a spare room and a job opportunity if you're interested." Tom was stunned. He had always believed that life was a series of challenges to be faced alone, but this moment shattered that belief. He never imagined that a simple act of kindness could change his life so drastically. It was as if a light bulb had gone off in his head, illuminating a path he had never seen before. He gratefully accepted the man's offer. This small gesture of goodwill was the beginning of something much larger, a ripple that would extend far beyond this moment. And so began Tom's journey back to a better life. Each step he took was filled with newfound hope and purpose, a stark contrast to the darkness he had known before. Tom's story is a reminder that even in the darkest of times, a little kindness can go a long way. These small acts of compassion, whether giving food, sharing a moment, or offering a hug, can create a profound impact. It shows the power of generosity to not only help others, but also to transform the giver's life. The ripple effects of kindness can lead to achievements and fulfillment that one might never have imagined. Never underestimate the impact of a kind heart. A single act of kindness can light up the darkest corners of someone's life, bringing warmth and light where there was none. You never know how it might come back to you. The joy and positivity you spread can create a chain reaction, ultimately returning to you in ways you never expected.